This guy drove 194 miles per hour on a public highway in the UK in a car with no registration. That got him in big trouble, landing him in jail. But despite that, he became one of the most famous names in the history of street racing. Kazuhiko "Smokey" Nagata is the guy who put a Nissan RB26 engine in a Supra. He put a modern GTR drivetrain in an R32. He even built a MK4 Supra with a V12 and went viral even before the internet was a big thing. His journey started on a remote farm on a Japanese island. Let's look into the history of Smokey Nagata and how he became one of the notorious street racers. But before diving deep, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for more videos. Now, without further ado, let's get started. The Hokkaido countryside in the 1970s was beautiful, a calm, serene island with fields of wheat and soybeans, under the soft shadow of the Ishikari Mountains. Everything you need to live a pleasant life as a farmer. But you know what they didn't have? Racing. And for the young Kazuhiko Nagata, that was a problem. Kazuhiko grew up in a farming family, like anyone in Hokkaido, but from an early age, he realized that he liked driving the farm truck more than he liked farming. His dad was a car guy, and Kazuhiko used to help him work on cars, trucks, and farming equipment. At first, he bought a motorcycle to tune up and race around the farmland, and when he turned 15, he was ready for his very first car. He scraped together whatever money he could and bought an old beat-up 1970 Mitsubishi Galant GTO. It was a fun little project for him to fix up and drive around, but there was a problem. It was really broken, and the young Kazuhiko just couldn't figure out how to get this thing running. Lucky for him, an employee of Toyota lived nearby, and they knew a thing or two about cars. So Kazuhiko and this friendly neighbor worked together to fix up that old Galant, and after not too long, they got it going. Kazuhiko was pumped. He had his very own running and driving car, and so what else to do but drive it to school? Turns out, though, driving as a 16-year-old was illegal, and when the school found out that one of their students was driving up and parking next to all the teachers, they expelled him. This wasn't exactly the outcome he had expected, but when his neighbor found out what had happened, he offered him a saving grace, a job at Toyota as a mechanic. At 16, he was the youngest employee they ever had. But all that meant to him was that he needed to work harder than everyone around him. And so he busted his butt at that job and learned the ins and outs of cars. But Kazuhiko was a tuner at heart, and so he bought an old Celica and started modifying it during his downtime at work. But downtime turned into all the time. All he ever cared about was building cars and going fast. When he wasn't working on the Celica, he was racing it up the local Tauge, testing and modifying the motor or suspension to go faster and faster. He was so obsessed that at a certain point, he was working on that Celica more than he was doing actual work, and when his superiors found out, they fired him. After that, he packed his things and decided to move to Tokyo, where he thought his racing-obsessed mind might be appreciated. When Kazuhiko got to Tokyo, he realized how expensive this city was compared to his home in Hokkaido. He ended up getting a job at a shop called Trust. At first, Kazuhiko started as a low-level grunt, packaging exhausts and turbos for customers. And as you can imagine, he was bored. Sure, the bills got paid, but this guy was driving the family truck and modding cars since he was a child. So how could boxing up car parts for 8 hours a day be enough? So after his shifts, he would ask the racing department if they could use any help, not for pay, but just for the experience, just to scratch that racing itch. The engineers were happy to have more hands, so they let him work on race cars with them. But as the months went on and experience was earned, he started working on his own projects using company resources. He would make new parts, install new aero, anything to make his car perform better, but all after hours, when nobody else was watching. Eventually, he became a respected mechanic at Trust. His work was honorable, his skill was mature beyond his years, and most importantly, his labor showed results. But as he began to spend more and more hours after closing working on his own cars, the bosses at Trust began to realize what was going on. Using company resources without permission wasn't something they could take lightly. But Kazuhiko was a fantastic worker and too valuable an asset to the company, so they couldn't just fire him that easily. Not without some suffering in the books. And so the bosses came up with a compromise. They said that he could work after hours as he wished, but he was to never tell anyone else what he was up to. Essentially, Kazuhiko and his bosses agreed to keep this a secret. A top secret. This little arrangement only lasted about a year, though, because in 1991, Kazuhiko left Trust to pursue his dream of opening up his own shop. The shop's name? Top Secret. It was the perfect storm for the JDM era of tuning. Legendary cars were being released left and right. The A86 was still fresh. The Supra was getting a 4th-gen makeover. RX-7 was getting another turbo, and Godzilla continued to terrorize the world. Tuning shops were scrambling to leave a mark on the street racing industry, and for Kazuhiko, it was no different. So his own shop, Top Secret needed to be something special. He didn't exactly have enough money to build a car for himself. So the first official Top Secret build was a customer car. It was a Toyota Soarer with a 7M GT engine, built with all the usual big power upgrades you would expect. Built engine, big turbo, intercooler, exhaust. He threw the whole catalog at this thing. It was pretty quick with a 12-second quarter mile, which was fast for 1991, especially considering that the 7M made about 240 HP stock on a good day. That build was a success and led to him being able to build a car of his own for the shop. His first canvas was an R32 GTR, and he built that RB engine to huge numbers, all in the name of speed. He would compete against tuners in the Aqua Line tunnel in Tokyo, doing runs well into the 200-kilometer-an-hour range, dodging traffic late at night, and he was fast. Kazuhiko's early work at Top Secret was respected by many of the other tuners around him. The business started growing through the mid-90s, and he was finally making a name for himself. But he wanted the shop to be bigger and more popular in the tuning industry. He wanted to prove that a car built at Top Secret meant something. First things first, though, he needed a car. This time, his canvas was the MK4 Supra. It makes sense if Top Secret wanted a car that made big power. Then the 2J was a no-brainer, right? Not exactly. This absolute madman pulled out the 2JZ engine and fitted an RB26. Yes, the engine from the Skyline GTR. His thought process was that the 2J had the displacement and was great for low-end grunt, but he needed high-end power for top-speed runs, and so Nissan's high-revving RB was the perfect fit. To make it happen, he fitted forged HKS pistons, truss rods, and then threw twin GT 3037 turbos on it. This thing made 1,200 horsepower on the dyno. Top Secret had the power they needed. So what could they possibly have in mind for such a machine? Kazuhiko wanted to take the Supra to the Nürburgring and hit 400 kilometers an hour down the back straight. That's 248 miles an hour. He decided that before he made the trip to Germany, he was going to give it a little test run. And so he loaded up the Supra, booked his team some flights, and went to the place with the best highways in the world, the UK. On a cold December morning in 1998, Kazuhiko and his team rolled the Supra off a flatbed trailer and onto a deserted stretch of the A1 highway in the UK. He buckled his harness and pulled down the visor on his helmet. He knew what he was about to do was very illegal. He warmed up the car, did his safety checks, and set off to make his 400-kilometer-an-hour pass. The long straight highway was perfect for getting up to top speed, and the road was empty enough for him to do it safely. He downshifted, matted the throttle, and felt that the 200 horsepower Supra pushed him into his seat. The speedo climbed 200, 250, 280 kilometers an hour. The Supra was screaming down the road, loud enough to wake up the whole neighborhood, and it wasn't long before the police got word of what was happening and quickly set out in pursuit. Meanwhile, Kazuhiko continued pushing the Supra, still accelerating, until the car reached a speed of 197 miles an hour, or 317 kilometers an hour. By that point, he was already starting to let off the gas. He knew it wasn't the 400 he was hoping for, but it was quick enough to prove a point. The police caught up to him, and he was arrested on the spot. But not just for speeding, he was also charged for driving an unregistered car, racing on public roads, and of course, reckless driving. That was a good enough list to land him in jail for a while and get him banned from the UK for 10 years. But it wasn't all for nothing. The stunt created a buzz in the car community. Everyone was talking about it. He became known as Smokey Nagata, and Top Secret had made a name for itself. But the story doesn't end there. Top Secret went on to build some of the wildest cars in the JDM scene. Cars like the V12 Supra, which had a Toyota Century V12 with twin turbos, making 930 horsepower. For the R33 GTR, which they turned into a speed demon with 1 horsepower and took to the Bonneville Salt Flats, where it hit 222 miles an hour. Smokey Nagata's dedication to building the fastest cars with the wildest modifications made him a legend. From humble beginnings on a farm in Hokkaido to becoming a tuning icon, Smokey Nagata showed that passion, creativity, and a bit of recklessness could take you far. His story is a testament to the spirit of the car community, where pushing the limits and daring to be different are always respected.